Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel and Escape from the City on the ABC. And Ben Kingsley, Chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of the 2018 Property Investment Advisory Firm of the Year.
All right, folks, you're on the Property Couch each week. Ben and I bring you the insider's guide to property finance and money management. Hello, Ben.
G'day, mates. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Terrific.
We've got a guest in the house today, so we'll get we'll get to our guest very shortly. But we've talked all year about it, Ben, so we might as well just round out the conversation now.
Yeah.
Around
Congratulations
yes
to the Collingwood Football Club women's team to win the very, very first AFL Women's Grand Final victory.
That's so Collingwood. It's so Collingwood for you to do that. That was so Collingwood for you to do that.
Set it up beautifully for me.
So
yes, Richmond.
It's
Tiger time.
Unfortunately, it was a bit of a boring game.
Mm-hmm.
Even my son, who is a passionate Richmond supporter,
it's a layup.
Watched the first quarter and the last 10 minutes of the fourth quarter. So,
best team in the back half of the year, had the form and took it right through to get the silverware. So good on them.
So well done to those folks. And of course, Ben, the NRL Grand Final this week.
NRL Grand Final this week between the Roosters and Canberra, the Raiders. So Ricky Stewart, I got the privilege of spending a little bit of time on Hamilton Island with Ricky Stewart, so I'm going for the Raiders.
Yep.
Good on you, Ricky. You do a great job there, and good luck to, the Roosters have won it a couple of times recently.
Our guest might have something to contribute, since it's his native sport compared to ours.
We've got a new coach, I see. Good to see that Collingwood do all of the training and education and pass it on to you.
That was a very Collingwood thing to do, what you just did there. But yes, thank you for training him up.
He's originally a Freo boy.
He's originally a Freo boy, Justin Longmuir.
Very good.
Hey, just to round out the competition we had all year, which was a lot of fun, getting everyone involved, getting amongst our community. Number one, the winner, Ben.
Drum roll.
Picked Richmond.
Pick Richmond.
Was Father of Dragons.
Oh,
Father of Dragons. Now,
got it done.
Terry G came second. Now, Terry G picked GWS. So, if Terry G had picked Richmond and a better margin...
It could have been... anyway.
But third was Rhino, who picked Richmond. And the honourable mention is Spiro Malakellus, because Spiro Malakellus has been amongst it the whole season.
Yes, he's been high.
But just missed out by margin. So,
shouldn't laugh.
Just picked
Spiro.
Close one by margin.
Yeah, I didn't think it would be that much. I thought it'd be 30.
So well done, folks. So Father of Dragons, there's a full property portfolio plan where we are going to reach out, make sure that we do that full assessment. Looking forward to seeing how that works for you. Terry G, we're going to do a property plan. So the property portfolio plan, that value is $4,950.
So expect a call from me. I'll talk you through both of those guys before I head overseas for a week.
Terry, that's $2,970 for the property plan. And third is Rhino, and that's a catch up with you and I, Ben. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, it should be fun.
Which will be terrific. So we'll reach out to you. Thanks for being a part of it. Thanks for everyone enduring the footy tip discussions.
And so no more footy banter for a while.
No.
Not even trade talk. We promise we won't even.
And the good news for people who listen to our podcast who don't like sport is you don't like cricket. So
yes,
it could be an NBA conversation at some point. A couple of quick things. Our friends at the Your Investment Property magazine.
Yes.
They have a Property Investor of the Year awards coming up, Ben, and it expires on the 25th. Stiggy will put some notes in the show notes for you if you feel like you want to be a part of that.
Love it.
We've actually had Property Investor of the Years on the podcast before.
We have.
Do you know who it is?
And there's some good prizes too, as well, in terms of what's available there. So if you think you're a damn good property investor and you want the world to know about you, that's a good award to apply for.
I think so. So show notes, check that out. Quick note for anyone who's listening to this podcast on Thursday, Ben.
Yep.
We're doing a webinar tonight.
Oh, yes, we are.
The 7 Deadly Sins. We're going to unpack what that looks like in a recovering property market. So if you want to be a part of that and you're listening to it on Thursday, go to thepropertycouch.com.au/webinar and you can check that out. And the last thing we wanted to talk about before we kick into it, Ben, is interest
big news
rates.
of the week, Bryce. So obviously on Tuesday I do my rate announcement. So if you haven't checked that out, it's on the podcast.
It is.
One of the previous episodes. But the big story was, what were the banks going to do? So I took a prediction that the banks would do sort of between 15 and 20 basis points. Sort of most of them have gone, like CBA did 12, and cheeky 13, I think they did. And so ANZ have done a portion of 14 and then 25 on their interest-only investment lending. All of those things have been playing out, but I would have thought that the banks would have done the right thing by doing 15, 20 basis points, and then we are going to see another rate cut. It's pretty inevitable. Well, in fact, our good friend Shane Olver, who we've had on this particular podcast, he's saying next month.
Oh.
So it is changing, right, in terms of, now I'm not quite over the line on next month yet, but that's a big call, right? And then he's now saying 0.25 is the bottom, whereas most other commentators are saying 0.5.
Yeah.
So, and I think the next one really does move. That's why I said the next one for the major banks, they'll probably only pass on 10 basis points, right, at best. So, our treasurer, Mr. Frydenberg, has, slammed the banks in the last 48 hours in terms of not passing on the full amount. Because obviously that's about getting the economy moving and consumption. So it is watch this space, and I do think the trigger for whether we see more rate cuts is probably what's happening globally, more so than what's happening domestically. So if we do see a trade deal between the US and China finalised before Christmas, then I think sentiment will improve, and that should give the Reserve Bank the impetus to sort of say, because what's happened is over 30 central banks around the world have adjusted their easing policy or eased their policy on monetary policy. So we're just playing in the same, why would we be any higher, right? Our growth rate is at, 10-year lows, right? So from that point of view, we are part of the global community. China's growth is slowing as Nerida, and you talked about on your recording earlier this week. So it's an interesting state of affairs that we're in. But I did also get an email from someone, right, who has some pretty influential data. And I'm talking about some of the biggest shopping centres in the country.
Yeah, you did.
Right, and that data was really positive on consumer spending. So, look, it's a small sample, but that's a positive story for me that, in terms of the subtle growth or the gentle growth.
I've got a client who owns a Harvey Norman store. I regularly talk to him just to get a bit of a sense of what's happening at the coalface. And
some of the tax money coming through. Okay, good to know. So there you go. That's the biggest news of the day, interest rates. And I'll be talking later on, Bryce, about in the Did You Know section about the property prices.
I like it. Yeah. All right, very good. So let's get into it today. My Mindset Minute theme is if you want to be in the top... Actually, I'll set this up. James Clear, we've seen James Clear.
Yes.
We're about to interview him shortly.
You are very excited. So am I, because he's got a very clear way of thinking.
I'll tell you why I'm excited, because the way that he thinks and some of the nuggets that he drops are just life-changing, Ben. So I've got one today, and I've also got one for next week. So I'm fully
invested.
Acknowledging the source, James Clear, and we will have him on the podcast. But today's, if you want to be in the top 1% of a particular domain, then you can't take your cues from and follow the social norms of 99% of people, Ben. This is harder than it sounds. We are wired to imitate. The further you want to climb, the more carefully you need to construct your tribe. So just let that land, because it's easy to have a platitude. Oh yeah, if you want to get what everyone else has got, what is it? If you do what everyone else does, you'll get what everyone else gets. But it is actually harder to execute that in practice.
I've been doing a lot of reading on critical thinking, Bryce, and the same principles apply where our brain deceives us quite regularly in terms of patterns that we see, observations that we see, and in terms of the social norms, people can tune back into those social norms. So even thinking differently is harder for a lot of people. And that rolls into, if you are thinking differently, then you can potentially take action in that space. So I love it. I think
because you need to carefully construct your tribe. It's something that we are trying to do within our own community, is to carefully construct the information, the filters, the guests we get on, the people that they all match what we think is the best way to go.
Keep the hype out and keep it to facts and figures and good education.
Hey, let's get to our guest, the man who knows a lot more about NRL than we do, Ben, but is pretty excited about this week, but has been on before. Not many people have been on sort of 3+ times, but this man has.
Well, Capital Growth King.
The Capital Growth King. Welcome back to the couch.
Thanks for having me back, guys.
Jeremy. The head of our research business, yes.
Yeah, I'm back in the Raiders as well. I always go for the underdog, though.
Yeah, well, they have to be the underdog.
Right. Yeah, it's 2-horse race, though.
Yeah.
Hey?
Well,
so your beloved team isn't.
Well, I don't have a beloved team, but I would have liked to see the
Sharks. I thought you were the West
Sharks.
Tigers, weren't you?
Oh yeah, it was the Magpies of years ago until Super League sort of, there was a merger. Yeah. But yeah, it was the Maggies.
Okay.
Yeah, NRL.
So there's something I liked about Jez.
Mate, if I had known that, I wouldn't have given that layup. But
so the Capital Growth King is in the house.
You've been busy in the lab, and so there's something that we want to sort of announce to the community today. Before we get to this, let's sort of cut a lap around the grounds and see what have your observations been around the country, this side of the sort of the correction.
Right. Well, there has been a lot of talk about things improving since APRA has taken the handbrake off and interest rates have come down a bit, and definitely I'm noticing that in the data as well. So there's been definitely an improvement in the overall demand to supply ratio across the country. Obviously, it's different based on city and suburb, but as a general rule, every market, in fact, every capital city has had an improvement in its demand to supply ratio since May.
Wow.
That doesn't mean there's been an increase in values. In fact, I think only Hobart had an increase in values. I think except for Hobart, every city has had a drop in its median value, but there's been an improvement in that demand to supply ratio, which means things are getting more positive.
So you measure typical value, and that data's up until when you're saying it has a drop, because obviously CoreLogic are, announcing some type of, correction in the market as of August. So talk us through.
Yeah, I'm talking about end to end from May to currently.
Oh, okay. So they're not back above.
So not like the last month.
Yes.
I mean, they go up and down from month to month. It's like. I'm seeing it. You asked me what have I been noticing? I've been noticing it's getting warmer. Every day is different, but there's a general trend. And I think it might be seasonal, but there's a general trend towards temperatures getting higher.
Yeah.
But every day is different. Yeah. So it's the same with the data. If you look at it every day, it's going to be changing up and down. But since May, there's been a drop in prices in pretty much every city, but the sentiment is improving.
And of course you sort of pegged it against May, which was the election.
Yeah, that's right.
So there was a significant change that you saw through April through to May?
Yeah. I mean, it'd been declining up until, and then went flat around April, and in May it was flat, and then straight away afterwards, a definite change.
So, but we're, for the audience who might be a little confused what we're talking about, we did see the peak of the market back at the end of 2017, which was well documented by most data houses in terms of the peak value. So what you were saying was the trend was still going lower, even from May.
Yes.
But in terms of the demand supply, it sounds like it's warming up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, some of these cities had pretty low base, like Darwin and Perth. So they're not as bad as they were, months ago. But they're still just coming back to a point of balance.
Yeah.
So there could still be some negative growth in, like Darwin, for example.
Yeah.
But Perth looks like it's sort of balanced out. And then, I wouldn't expect any growth in any capital city, with possibly exception of Canberra, Hobart, and Melbourne, for the rest of this year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So, well, that's kind of a bit of a segue. But what particular clusters or what particular segment would you, within those benchmarks of what you just said, where are you seeing activity?
Well, Sydney in the northern beaches, eastern suburbs, and in the Sutherland Shire, those markets look pretty hot. I mean, the rest of Sydney is pretty much a minefield, hit and miss. But those sort of markets, I think what's happened is there was that correction, and it might have been like an overcorrection. Prices got quite high. There was a lack of confidence amongst buyers, and now they've seen prices come back in some cases like 20%. They're thinking, well, gee, that's actually good value for money, and so they're back in the hunt. So I wouldn't expect to see prices go beyond where their prior peak was. It's probably just a correction of a correction.
Yeah, the pendulum's swinging back to the middle.
Yeah, that's what I'll share in the CoreLogic data as well. That's saying the same thing. We're not back over what the peaks were.
That's right.
We're probably only
just
halfway back, right? That's right.
So what's the message that, because you talked about those areas in between now and Christmas, what would be your message to the folks in Perth and Darwin that have been bumbling
I
along
knew you would
for some
ask
time.
about Perth.
Yeah, mate.
I'm prepared, actually.
I get ransomed by my family, mate. They say it's your job to give Perth a lift, and so
we need to change the sentiment for Perth. Yeah.
so
this is the thing about markets within markets. I mean, overall, Perth is pretty negative, but there are some really excellent buys just west of the CBD.
In the more affluent areas.
Yeah, it's always
so from
the
City
affluent
Beach
areas,
up, right?
Yeah. So I just checked.
Look at you name dropping your Perth suburbs over there, hey, just because you married a Perth girl.
No, I'm lucky. I'm lucky that I get to see the data as well. I get to see the heat scores on the geospatial map, so I look at them.
Yeah. So the affluent areas, you nailed it. It's like Wembley. Is it Dalgleish? Dalgleish, Mount Claremont. Yeah.
What about Dog Swamp and Innaloo and Wanneroo?
Oh, Dog Swamp! I haven't.
No, I'm just poking fun at some of the suburb names over there. Someone says, "Do you live in Innaloo?" And the next question is, "Oh, is it wet? Is it wet?"
Is it wet Innaloo? Yeah. Very good.
It's a true story. That is a suburb, Innaloo.
So we're letting people sort of hang a bit. Because we've done Sydney, we've just done a bit of...
Right, okay.
So let's look at Melbourne and let's look at Brisbane.
Melbourne, there are pockets of growth. They all seem to be quite close to the CBD, so just south of the CBD, just to the north, and places just to the east. Yeah. Melbourne actually looks quite positive generally, which is a surprise, of course. And I think that's, again, the story of overcorrecting and just coming back. People are seeing prices come back, 15% or whatever. It now looks like a bargain, plus interest rates.
And still incredibly affordable compared to Sydney, right?
Well, that's the point, because on the ground, right, what I want to say to the community is don't be seduced by the headlines, because on the ground, there is real heat in, I can assure you, we missed a lot of properties last month. So across the board, sure, you might get a headline sort of discussion, but in the good spots, and if you'll notice the trend that Jeremy's saying, in the west of Perth and in the east of, like all the good parts of the big cities, but if you overlay a map of suburbs in Sydney that are greater than $1 million median, and it's a sea of red, right? You do the same exercise in Melbourne, and it's nowhere near, despite the fact that they both attract big companies with knowledge workers, and so there's still that price discrepancy that I think creates a really great opportunity. So make no mistake, if you're buying in Melbourne, there's good opportunity, but also you've got to actually move really quickly. Like we have this mantra in our business, and we talk to our clients that you're never in a hurry to find a property, but when you find a property, you're in a hurry. And the point being is, don't think that there's time, like you've got to move quick, and we're missing if you don't move quick. So it's interesting to hear your feedback from your sort of view with Melbourne, because on the ground, there is some heat.
Okay, so let's jump into South East Queensland. What do you got for us in South East Queensland?
Okay, so Brisbane, all the hot markets seem to be within about a 10-kilometre radius of the CBD. Yep. And they're scattered north, northwest, southwest, and also the southeast, although there's a lot of vacant land there. So if buyers are looking there, they need to steer clear of those, or developers call them growth corridors. It's not,
we call them
not the sort of growth.
Different type of growth.
Yeah.
That's construction
it's
growth.
Supply growth.
It's their balance sheet growth.
Yeah, so I would suggest that investors be cautious of those sort of greenfield estates, but there are opportunities to the southeast.
And the Gold Coast?
Gold Coast is still looking solid. I thought that Brisbane was probably better. Sunshine Coast also quite healthy too, my preference would be just within that 10-kilometre radius of CBD for Brisbane. And Adelaide? Adelaide's... I reckon Adelaide's the most exciting for me from a practical perspective. It may not, appear in the news like with Brisbane and Melbourne and like Hobart did recently, but there are these pockets that are really hot. A couple of suburbs that are just super hot, and they're sort of speckled around the city. So you've got places to the south, to the west, and to the northeast, and these markets have higher demand to supply ratios than any other suburb in the country. It's just that the city as a whole looks a little more ordinary. And the peculiar thing is, people for years have been saying, Adelaide is one of these cities that just ticks along. And And that may have been the case in the past, but there's no reason why it can't boom. I'm not saying that it's going to boom. In fact, there's nothing in the data to suggest that it's going to be like Sydney over the last 5 years. But there are isolated markets that look attractive, and there's no reason to believe that they can't boom just because in the past they haven't.
I mean, in relative terms, it's quite a small population, right? Some of our, it's like southeast Queensland sort of eats Adelaide up. Gold Coast is almost the size, size of Adelaide type thing, right? So I mean, obviously they've got a lot of investment through their space program, so they're going to bring in sort of higher talented, higher paid programs. Now, everyone's going to go, the space program, everyone's talking that up. It might be 100 people.
But they've got education as well. They've still got a capital city job market.
Correct. So if they can get their economy moving a bit stronger more broadly, then it can get into boom-like environment. Because what we're seeing in the data is everything still correlates back to pretty strong economic activity. So when you get a rising tide lifting all ships, it's pretty much led by population and economic activity in that area. So when Sydney's economy's booming, when Melbourne economy's booming, and they both are right now, they're providing most of the jobs. If you look at the jobs data, it's all Melbourne and Sydney are pretty much doing the heavy lifting in terms of all the job stories. So I think that's there. I mean, Canberra's pretty much, Well,
I was just going to say, sorry, on Adelaide, what I've noticed is a real sentiment shift towards investors actually being open to investing into the Adelaide market. I mean, I've been doing this since 1998, Ben, and probably in the last 3 years, it's probably the first time I've seen the sentiment outside of Adelaide where people are going, all right, I actually will embrace that. Whereas in the past, it was almost like a flippant, no way. I'm not going to Adelaide. So they almost had this insular market, but I know ourselves and I know other people in our peer group who are openly embracing and
buying for
their
clients
there, and the data that Jeremy's seeing is backing that up.
Yep, absolutely.
Because we use the data that Jeremy provides as the opening discussion point for anywhere we go. We feel like it's an unfair advantage for us because we can see what's happening at the coalface where the demand is before it actually gets to headline level, which is pretty cool. So we can get in early.
Terrific. So we'll just round out basically Hobart, Tassie and Canberra.
Yeah, well, Hobart, it's really towards the end of its market. It's still outperforming everything else, but that's the trailing end. So
the outperform is on a 12-month rolling or a 3-month rolling, or how are you looking at that?
Well, yeah, I guess over the last couple of years, really.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Well, the test comes now for what happens in the next sort of 4 to 7 years, because that's what we've said all along. If it does that, that's fine if you're a short-term opportunist. But if you're wanting to get consistent growth over time, I'm most interested to see.
Well,
if history
over
itself.
the last 30 years, which would you pick as the better long-term market, Melbourne or Hobart? As
a relative value or as a percentage?
Percentage.
Well, I think you're going to load the question at Hobart, but I think I'd rather have my dollars in Melbourne.
They're about level at the moment. But if you go back a year, Hobart would have been outperforming Melbourne. That's over a 30-year period. And that's because it's all the growth that happens recently. So this is the thing with compound growth. The vast majority of it happens in the last few years. So there are suburbs around Australia that might be, say, 200 years old, and in the next 20 years, which is like 10% of their age, they're going to more than double in value. In fact, that's lower than national long-term growth if you triple over the next 20 years in value. So that means 75% of their value over a 200-year period came in the last 10% of their history. So what happened in the past is just a little speed bump compared to what's happening recently. So whatever city has had the latest boom, it will look like it's had the best long-term growth.
Well, a good example of that is if you actually go back 5 years, the previous 10 years of that, Darwin was the number one capital city performer.
Right, yeah, good example.
So they'll, but that that was on the back of the gas boom and the investment from the US, and so everything was booming there. The city was booming, but now it's if you extrapolate that out, and I think that's going to be a story, in my view, of what's going to happen in Hobart, because we saw they did a 50% run, I think, in 2005. And then basically this last run, but then everything else basically is, flat. So I think if you do 30, 40, 50 years, it's going to be interesting in terms of what that looks like, because if income doesn't go down there, it'll reach a tipping point.
Yeah, looking at this, say 40-year history of all the cities, they all trade blows. They had their time in the sun, and then they have their wallows and their shallow growth periods, but they all have a great shot at it sooner or later.
Yeah, and that's why we, again, don't spend much time in talking about the capitals, because you can't buy the capital, you can't buy the whole market. You've got to look at the markets within markets in terms of where you'll get those, longer term growth stories, especially if you're planning a 40 or a 50 year model, and if that's going to be your retirement fund. You do want to look at short opportunities in terms of trying to get into those right markets where demand exceeds supply, but over the long term, you're confident that the land value that underpins that is going to grow substantially, because that's really the story here. The land is where you get that long-term sustainable growth. It's not in the improvements on the land, and so owning valuable land in the right area will ultimately be part of that journey for the investor for the long term. So Canberra, Jez?
Yeah, it's one of the best markets in the country, but of course it's been that way for quite a few years now. So it's probably well advanced in its cycle. People need to be aware of land tax there. And
so for rookie players, we don't go into that market for investing, because we just everything we earn goes back to the government in land tax. So you might as well just move on. But if you're owner occupied, not a bad place to buy.
Might as well move on.
Well, or buy on the fringe.
Info at thepropertycouch.com.au for those who want to write in.
Yeah, buy on the New South Wales side of Queanbeyan and those types of. They're good buys there. Very good. So there we go. Thank you for wrapping that up. So now I want to talk about what you have been doing in terms of the work that we've been doing, and obviously in terms of the work you've been doing on the DSR ratio. You started that work back in 2010 to measure these types of markets, and you've developed a very, very reliable indicator of capital growth in different markets. Okay, it's very, very good. The best we've ever seen in terms of all the research we've looked at. So from that, you've been able to develop tools for people to use to allow them to not make silly decisions. And if we align, that's why, we obviously work together in Select Residential Property as a business, because the reality is we started this podcast, Bryce, didn't we, as a story for people to not get spooked to, not to destroy their financial future by making a poor decision, because it is such a high value transaction that if you make a wrong call and you find yourself in negative equity. So we, Bryce said, another one stung. These are the types of things that we wanted to fix up. And now we're being able to do that, haven't we, Bryce? Yeah,
well, this people being stung badly on a routine basis was the thing that we were trying to avoid, right? So what the charter of the Property Couch has been is to try and provide as much as we possibly can for free, without you and me doing a weekly advertisement of our business and all that sort of thing. So we're really proud of that. We've been able to do free resources like the free money management tool, so people can control and trap their surplus, binge guides, videos, Facebook groups. At certain times we do giveaways on our book. We're currently doing one now with Make Money Simple again. And then there are certain times where we actually have to charge a fee because we're going to recoup the cost. So we've introduced sell or hold, and that was obviously at a fee for those people who want to take up that service. LocationScore, which we think has been amazing at helping people sort of identify what Jeremy was just sort of summarising earlier. How can I see where the demand is exceeding supply? How can I get the advantage on that? So we've introduced that. That was obviously at a cost for those people. So we've now had Jeremy in the lab and created another product. And this one isn't free, Ben, but I think it's priced very competitively, so lots of people can get access to it. So, and we think it's a really huge step forward to add this to the suite of products that you guys have been developing, because it predicts the capital growth of a suburb. And most people think that knowing the value of a property today is important, and it is, but getting to know what it might be worth in the next 3 years is potentially a game changer. So I'll throw it to you, Jeremy. What is suburb growth?
Well, it is a website that forecasts a suburb's growth. It's aptly named. Yeah.
I love that about you, mate. It is
straightforward, right?
But you're obviously part of this too, Ben. So
yeah. Oh, look, we know based on Jeremy's data that we were able to basically get a data scientist in and work through that data and try to cleanse a model and an algorithm that will give us a forecast of 1, 2 or 3 years of capital growth. Anything beyond that, as Jeremy's always pointed out, it comes back into equilibrium so that you're going to get these little spurts. And so with that data, and Jeremy will go to a deep dive in it, we just said, well, we can do a prediction tool. So, and a prediction tool like this, people say, geez, it's going to cost thousands and thousands of dollars, because it's so, so rare and it's so refined. It's like, well, that's not our mantra, right? We want to make it affordable. We want to make it available for everyone, and so that's why we've priced it at $19.95.
Yeah,
it's just like it's a layup and it's a no-brainer.
Well, here's the thing: it was tested through the LocationScore community, and they had a huge appetite for it, which was exciting. But Jeremy, I mean, how does it work? Because let me be the cynic here, right? How can you give me a crystal ball for what's happening over the next 3 years, and how can you be confident in the data?
Okay, well, first of all, it's not 100%. It's not foolproof. It's not guaranteed. It is just a forecast, an estimate. But what we've been doing for nearly a decade now is recording all this property data. Some of the well-known metrics include things like auction clearance rates, vacancy rates, selling times, stock on market, that sort of thing. And we've also got some novel ones like ripple effect potential and neighbour price balancing, market cycle timing. There are about 17 of these variables that we know about a property market to score its supply and demand. So the demand to supply ratio has been around since around January 2010. And over that period of time, we've had the opportunity to see how have suburbs with a score of 50 performed, how have suburbs with a score of 60 performed. And looking at that history, we've been able to then take the next step and say, well, if this suburb has a score of 71, we can expect this sort of capital growth over the next 1, 2, 3 years. So it's based on historical evidence, it's based on supply and demand, and it's a reasonably accurate forecast. So this gives people a bit of a heads up into the short-term future. We know that we can't predict into the long term, it's just too tricky, but it's good enough. And just having a few minutes to look at this sort of data would have saved people from buying into a dud location and ruining their financial future. And as Ben was saying, if you value this sort of technology, investors are looking for any excuse not to spend $500. So if you keep it down to the absolute no-brainer sort of cost, then they've run out of excuses, and that prevents them from getting into trouble.
Well, Ben, price is what you pay, value is what you get, right? So the value that Jeremy just described is enormous. So the price could be easily in the hundreds of dollars. So the price point of $19.95, what was you thinking behind that?
Well, I just wanted it to be another affordable validation tool. So, there are plenty of free sites offering lots of information, and some of them valuable, but the reality is data is king, right? And data is where you get your insights from. And Jeremy's algorithm is a market-leading algorithm in terms of predicting capital growth. So why give that to the small few? There's enough cost in buying property and stamp duties and all these other things. So the idea was if we priced it really cheap, then people could run several reports for themselves and feel validated in the research that they've already done, or they already own a home and they want to just check, should I keep it, or things like that. So it's very clear for us in terms of it's time effective, it's part of a series of investigations that you will make as part of your research, and you've got that as a validation tool. You wouldn't take a second thought in terms of spending $20 to just check your blind spots.
Yep.
So that's the sort of backstory, Bryce.
So that's good. So now, as we like to do with our community, Ben, we want to give them extra value. So we've given them the frameworks to understand how to make a decision. Now we've given them an opportunity to use LocationScore to get the suburb. What are we going to offer for our TPC listeners to get access to suburb growth?
Well, we're consistent, right? So in terms of this, we give a 25% discount. In other things we've done, we've given 20%, 25% discount. No different. We want to see them, so it's $5 off. So for $14.95, you can get in there, kick the tyres on this thing. There's a free report that you can also see. Have a look around. I'm really proud of the work that's being done because it's also really easy to follow. It's an interactive platform that you'll get access to There's also lots of other data in there as well, so you'll get historical price points, historical percentage performances and value performances. You'll get a snapshot of some of the data in terms of stock on market and those types of things as well, all in that price point. So I don't want to sit here and sell it, because it'll sell itself. It's a great tool, and we just say to everyone who's serious about understanding where the value of property is going to go in that particular suburb for houses or for units, it's a great product.
You're right, $19.95 is pretty good. For a limited time, it's available for $14.95. If you go to suburbgrowth.com.au and plug in TPC25, that means that you'll get that discounted price. So go and have a look around, folks. We think it will make an enormous difference for you. And Jeremy, and well done, mate, in the lab pulling that together.
And give us some feedback on it. Yeah. So there's a contact us on there. So give us some of that feedback, and if you're loving it as well, share that with us and tell more people about it, because it's going to move the dial. It's such a game changer, because as you were saying before, Bryce, people. It's good to know what your value of your property is today, but in reality, I really want to know what it's going to be worth in 1, 2 or 3 years' time from now. So. Thank you, Jezza, for coming in.
Thanks for coming in. It's good to catch up with you quarterly. We might even try and sneak you in before we break off for a holiday, Ben, just to see how this quarter has actually gone with the property. But mate, well done, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, Ben, so also what I want to contribute today to our community is we get a lot of people give us feedback on how they've implemented the money smarts or how they're managing their money. And there's some themes that we've uncovered from, gee whiz, there has to be over 100 plus here, right?
Yep.
So what I thought we'd do is just curate some of the themes and talk people through what it takes to be, because if you can't get on top of your money management, Ben, the rest is just superfluous stuff that we're talking about, because you don't want to add an investment property to the mix if you can't do this. So I wanted to identify a couple of themes, but I know you've done the same thing as well.
So let's just work through it and we'll see where we get to.
But one of the themes that some people may be able to relate to that's coming across here is one person in a partnership is keen, motivated, has the vision of where they want to be, but they can't get the other person on the same page. And if you can't do that, well, that's 101.
I'm having a giggle here, Bryce, because the question that we asked is, what's your biggest money management challenge? And how many said my wife, my husband,
partners,
my partner, my friend,
bringing my partner on board,
my husband, my wife.
I wonder if anyone who's listening to this is nodding, going, "Yep, that's my partner. He just won't do it. She just won't do it."
Because that jumped out as the theme, right? Selling the benefits of this to your partner. Like, we all have relationships, and some of us are better with money than others. Some of us, money burns a hole in the pocket, and the other, that yin yang. Maybe that's why we connect so well together. So it's really important to align. I can help solve some of those things in terms of what it is. If you can't bring your partner on board, it's because you haven't identified perspective or context, and what I call is aligning your partners. So aligning your partner with your priorities. So if you and I would sit down as a couple, and once we work through everything, we would be able to work out what our priorities are. And when you've got your big rocks in the jar, which is what we've always referred to them, it's then very clear. If we want to get to that priority, there's potentially going to be some trade-offs, but then if we don't, and there's consequences if we don't, conform our money management to those types of levels. So I always say align priorities, get the timing in terms of how you organise your money, and understand the impact of that decision. So that's the consequences. So if we do that, and we've got a budget, for a holiday of $3,000, but we decide to buy that couch because the other couch is not on trend, but it's still perfectly comfortable to sit on, then the reality is that's got to come from somewhere else if you haven't planned it in your 12-month, provisional allocation.
I like it, Ben. So obviously always looking for a sporting analogy. So in the shadows of Richmond's win, if at the beginning of the year they all said, what is our mutual goal? And generally speaking, it's to get their hands on the Premiership Cup. That brings everyone in alignment to where they're headed.
Yep.
Whereas if some people are saying, well, I want to kick as many goals from the boundary on my left foot when I'm a right footer and get as much adulation from the crowd, that's not going towards the stream goal.
No.
Or if someone says, I want to get as many endorsements as I possibly can, or someone says, I want as many offers to move, all of a sudden...
I want a new contract personally.
And I want it at the expense of all my teammates.
Yep.
All of a sudden, you've lost sight of what everyone is collectively working towards. So I think that is an analogy of what you just described. Is first step is talking to your partner, talking to your significant other, and saying, what is it that we both have a joint goal to? What is our AFL Premiership? What is our NRL Premiership? What is our Cricket World Cup? What is it that we're both jointly in alignment on, so that we can actually say, because generally these topics come down to, well, you just want me to stop spending, or you don't want me to enjoy myself, or you want me to cut back. And the answer is no, that's not what we want. That's not what we want, but we actually want to make sure that I've got a Scott White testimonial.
Yep.
I've got that coming up, but he reached out to me again. He said, the difference when my wife and I suddenly got on the same page was enormous to the personal happiness of everyone. She didn't feel like she couldn't do what she wanted to do, and I didn't feel like I couldn't, because we knew we were both heading towards the same goal. So,
because if you approach it from, honey, I don't think we're good money managers, and it's confrontational then, right? And then so everyone just gets defensive and says, oh, well, you spend on that. And the conversation is not going to be a productive conversation around, but if you get alignment on your priorities and you come from that context, the conversation will grow. The openness in the conversation around how you're having those open and frank things. And usually what you'll find is your partner will then put on the table rather than you having to get it. Yeah, you're right, I probably do that. And so if you want to have a win, put one thing that you do on the table that you're admitting that is probably not ideal for us getting to our priorities, and it'll be reciprocated. So don't ask the other to get theirs out. Put yours on the table first.
And be mindful of language. We need to do these sorts of things rather than you need to do this. So I'm saying I've had these conversations with my wife, so I'm not talking theory, and I've cocked them up. Don't worry. So I've gone, you need to do this, and
I've overspent when I said I wasn't going to do it. So life does get in the way, but if you come back to a system, a rules-based system, and a way in which you can organise your money and control it and see the impacts of those decisions, I tell you what, alignment is easier than what it is in just sort of saying, well, we set a budget, but we never followed it.
Agreed. So it's sort of an extension of that. The next thing I would be saying is once you can have that conversation, and it doesn't have to be overly sophisticated, as long as you are sort of rowing in the same direction. The next thing I'd say is paradigm shift, Ben, from when we get paid on a Thursday or a Friday I would reframe the salary or the wage that's coming into you. That's not when you get paid. You need to, in our view, strong view, it's something that we do ourselves, you got to view that you are getting paid when you receive your 7-day float. Because the rest isn't yours. The rest is allocated. The rest has got a job to do somewhere else. That is where you get paid. If you can get the muscle memory around that changed, that alone will be a game changer, because you'll both go, okay, well then we know that there's a certain amount that we can spend and we can manage it over a 7-day period. Then it starts to become manageable how you can actually make some effective change.
Yeah, that's the account. That's the account that you should have your eyeballs on. Your 7-day float, your living and lifestyle account, is the only account you need to have your eyeballs on. Because all of the other, because you've organised your money and you calculated it out in terms of what you need to have for when that money falls due, then the rest of the money is trapped in surplus that's sitting in your primary account that you don't even need to worry about. And then when you check in each month, and if you use the platform to do it, you get an immediate update in terms of your progress, in terms of how you're doing. It is so easy once you get the consistency. You talk about consistency a lot, right? In terms of, and it's true, consistency will move behaviour into routine and habit. And so I'm a big believer in that, because the other theme that came through that was quite interesting for me was they don't have any awareness. Like, a lot of comments in here around
don't know where it goes,
don't know how much I spend, so
scaling back
losing
on the work
track
coffees.
of spending. They are all consistent with the vast majority of people in terms of what I spend and my savings plan. So really simple again. We talk about ready, set, go, but it's basically gather, sort, calculate. So that just getting awareness on your different expense items is new information, and with that information can move the dial on behaviour. And then once you know that it's automatically set into the different jars, it's like, okay, I'm now clearer. I have a more awareness of the picture of my money, and if I have a picture of my money, then ultimately I can then see the potential of my money as you move forward. So I'm sort of saying there's people who we got feedback from is like, you need to do the effort of the first gather and sort and calculate, right? That ready stage is important. And I know for some people it's like, oh, but I've got different accounts and I've got different money everywhere. Please do the exercise. You are not going to be able to do your 7-day float. You're not going to be able to do anything until you do that ready stage, of the process.
I would say, Ben, on that in a vacuum, I would 100% agree.
Yep.
But for this, I'm just speaking to the folks here who really are struggling to get started.
Yep.
I would say two things: a 7-day float and rearrange your banking, right? Because if you give yourself, and even if you don't know what the number is, say you think I need to spend $450 a week, or you're at $1,000, or you're at $250, whatever it is, just have a reasonable stab and get into the rhythm of following the principle of the 7-day float. I get paid on a Thursday. We strongly recommend it being a Thursday.
Yep.
And I can't spend again until next week, until the money comes in on Thursday. And if that's all you do for the next 7 days, that is fine.
Yep.
Because once you get a bit of a rhythm up on that, and you do that 2 times, you do that 3 times, the muscle memory will start to form, and then you'll go, okay, what's next? And then we'd say go back to the start of the book and actually work through it. So for people who find this quite simple or straightforward to adopt, absolutely what you said. But I'm talking to people who just really feel overwhelmed and don't even know where to start. That would be my number 2 things. Understand the 7-day float, and then just simplify your banking structure enormously. Get it down to 1 debit card. If you struggle with credit cards, don't even get a credit card, but 1 debit card, 1 credit card, 1 offset account, and then your passive loan accounts. That is it. It doesn't need to be any more complex than that. And slowly add another layer, because some people will look at our book, Ben, and just think that's too hard, it's overwhelming, I can't do it. Just do those 2 things.
Yep. Well, that's the set stage in the process that we've documented. Because you're right, the book is try to be a framework in terms of, but some people might just start with, well, I roughly know what I spend each week, so I'm just going to put that into a separate account and see how I go. That's the 7-day float concept. Because
some people have got legacy too, Ben. Like they've seen their parents do no boundaries around money, just forever struck. So we come from a whole range of different perspectives. Dave Ramsey says money is simple, behaviour is hard. So it's the behaviour stuff we've got to undo.
Yep.
So there you go, folks. I would suggest that if you identify with this is too hard, I'm not sure where to start, it seems overwhelming, do those 2 things. And that's it. Don't worry about the rest. Once you've done those 2 things, we'll show you another layer. And in fact, we're actually going to give you the book. We're going to give you the instruction manual.
That's it.
On how to do this.
You've got the instruction manual and you've got the free platform to set it. So to even work out your calculation, you just go to the expense item and punch the numbers in, and it's all calculated for you. So then you can get started on, okay, well, that's now how much money I need to put in a separate account, and that's my living float for the week. And that, as you say, will get people, actually, it's now a challenge. I've now gamified it for myself in terms of I'm more conscious of my spending, because that was the final thing that I saw in all of those great bits of feedback in the biggest challenge was overspending. So the overspending story will stop. I promise you, it will stop once you set the 7-day float.
Once you have a vision. Yep.
That's it. And that's the money, right? And it's over there. So all of a sudden now, you will consciously spend that float, because this is and that's the money you said you were going to spend. So go off and spend it. But the other money's set behind the scenes, ready for the time that it's going to do its job, because it's doing its job in the offset account every night. It's saving you interest. Okay, and then when the time comes for that dollar to be allocated for a job, like a bill, then it's doing its job as well. But if it's also allocated for surplus, well, that's the game changer in terms of wealth creation and driving financial peace.
Now, Ben, I just want you to talk amongst yourselves here, because I'm going to have a little chat to a certain segment of our community that you will not relate to, okay? Right, now, I just want to have a little chat to the perfectionists, all right? Now, I'm a recovering perfectionist. I can say I've taken huge leaps in that. Done is better than perfect right now. So I know you won't relate to this, Ben, because you're not a perfectionist. But for the perfectionists that are out there who think, I'm not going to start this unless I get it done perfectly, I want you to just follow the mantra that has helped me enormously. Done is better than perfect. So when Ben said get on the platform and do your budget, perfectionist Ben generally go, but I haven't got everything in it. I can't do it until I've got it. I'm going to say to you folks, get it done 70%. Because once you get it in there, 80% of winning is beginning. You'll get it in there, and then what will happen? You'll see the vision, you'll get started, you get some momentum, and you'll come back and you'll tweak it. And your budget will be 80% right. And then you'll come back next week and it'll be 86% right. And then it'll be 92%. And all of a sudden you'll work up to it being a true reflection of what you've got. Versus those folks, Ben, who are going to get around to it. They're going to get around to it. And the reason they don't start is because they haven't perfectly got everything sorted. So that was just a little chat between me and them, Ben.
Bryce, I feel like this is Christmas. I don't know why, but I feel like it's Christmas in October.
Approaching Christmas, yeah.
You know why? Because since the 250th show, which I know it happened at sort of end of September, but we've got all these great things that we're sharing and giving away and giving all of this extra value, and I can't hold it back. I'm going to tell everyone now, right, that there is something coming at the end of October which will allow you to sort. So let's say you use the platform and you only do the 70%, and you want to know what you spend on groceries compared to someone like you in the same city, the same age range as you, the same income as you, what they spend on groceries, what they spend on rent, what they spend on TV and pay television, and what they spend on internet, what they spend on mobile phones. You will be able to find out on the platform by the end of October. So I couldn't wait. I know it's a big thing, it's just like I feel like we're just in this moment.
You just wanted to jump in on the perfectionist party, didn't you? Help them out.
I can't wait. So we've been working really hard on building out that filtering in the money fit side of the platform. So it is coming. So just keep an eye out for that. So as you say, get on there now. You already get income, you get group surplus, you get global expenditure in terms of how you compare to other households. But we are going to also break it down by household composition. So if you're a couple with 2 kids, you'll be able to look at couple with 2 kids with a certain income in this state. How do I compare? So I don't know, but you just inspired me to sort of say, oh, what's the benefit of me doing it now if I can only do it 70%, and I'm a perfectionist? Just get on there and find out what others are doing, because that should then challenge you in terms of what's best practice to track more surplus. And that's always been our vision, because ultimately why we live and breathe on this earth in terms of the work that we do is about financial peace, and it's about moving the dial on households in terms of every household can manage their money better. Every household can improve their financial position. It all comes down to practice what you preach, and changing behaviours and getting the tools to help you do that. So that's why we said Money Smarts will be forever free on our platform.
There you go, folks. So if you are a perfectionist, I'm going to throw the challenge out to you to just go and start. Doesn't matter where you end up, just start and build some momentum. Hey, another theme that came through, Ben, was people spending on the credit card instead of using the float. That's a muscle memory that needs to be worked. You have to go to the gym on that. You have to. I'm going to be honest. That's the bit where you've got to really dig in, because you're so ingrained in going to IGA and the chemist and the Burger King and all those sorts of things. I know we don't have Burger King here, but I was just listening to a podcast about McDonald's versus Burger King at the moment. But so. You have to practice that. You have to consciously be aware as you're setting up this 7-day float that is the enemy. Because I've said it a million times. The enemy is not when you accidentally go and buy a 55-inch plasma, LED, whatever it is. It's that little incremental slippage that happens over time, and if you can get in control of that, it's a game changer.
And usually it happens in social outings or grocery shopping.
Yep.
Right, no doubt about it. Like you're in a shout or something like that, and you're like, okay, my 7-day float. It's Sunday night, and I've gone a bit hard on Friday, Saturday,
my turn.
And so it's my turn. So it's socially awkward in terms of what you've got there. So there will be times where you'll be tempted to do that. The other one, the classic one, is the trolley going through the supermarket, and you go to pay on the debit card and there's not enough in there. Well, you're not going to take a couple of items out because you're embarrassed because there's 2 or 3 people behind you. Oh, actually, I can't afford that. You just won't do it. Most people won't. There'll be the odd person who, yep, okay, I can't afford that, I can't afford that. So when you go in for a shop or when you go for a drink, open up your app, your banking app, you'll see the amount of money that you've got in that 7-day float. And that's also why we say do the grocery shopping on the Thursday or the Friday. So you get that out of the way. So you know you've got good food.
What's left is yours to spend.
And then what's left is part of all the other things that you said you were going to do. Because once you do the expense item, you've got the summary of all of those expense items that make up your 7-day float. So it's also good to know.
See any other themes, Ben?
I know, they were my main ones. Have you got any more?
Just largely around sticking to the 7-day float. How do I trap the surplus? Knowing where my money goes. Saving it and what to do with it. It's like major in getting those basics right, because if you do, then you will know where the money goes. You will know how to trap the surplus, and then that's a nice problem to have, Ben. When someone said here, I don't know, saving it, and then what do I do with it? That's a good problem to have.
Oh, as soon as you've got it and you're trapping it, it's deposit building for a home. It's paying off debt. It's potentially, in some cases, if you've rewarded yourself better than what you've done, maybe there's a discretionary reward in there, in terms of a short-term milestone goal that you can also then say, well, I've done better than I thought I would, so I'm going to treat myself to X or Y. So I think that's really important. And I know we've got hundreds and hundreds of questions in here, but the same applies, Bryce, in the Facebook community. So the movement that we're building on Facebook in terms of the Make Money Simple Again group, there are some great questions in there. One that we just had recently around travelling overseas and what card to use. So, there was all these people, when I go overseas and my credit card, I get all these extra fees. So there were some great tips around the CBA travel money card. Also, I threw in there, I'm going overseas next week. We've got the Qantas money card. So they're like debit cards, and you can put different currencies in there, and you can travel under a MasterCard or a Visa arrangement. And there's some other great ones in there, which I actually went on there and said, I've never heard of that card before. I'm going to check it out. So, and everyone's answering each other's questions. So the community's
amazing. I was going to say that if you are struggling, go in that community and ask the community, what were you like at the beginning? Did you struggle to set it up at the beginning? What did you do to overcome your own behaviours? So what we're going to do in the show notes is we're going to put a link to the instruction manual, Ben.
Yep.
Which is makemoneysimpleagain.com.au. You can get our book for free. So go and get that Choose Your Own Adventure. We're also going to put a link to the Make Money Simple Again Facebook group, so you can go and be a part. Get yourself around good people.
Love it.
Because you remember what my mindset minute was today, Ben? If you want to be in the top 1% of a particular domain, then you can't take your cues from and follow the social norms of 99% of the people, Ben. Carefully, this is how I ended, carefully construct your tribe. So go and be a part of that community. So we're going to put that into the show notes, Ben, so that you can make this system straightforward and set it up nicely for you. And we'll also put the link to Suburb growth in the show notes. So there's a fair bit if you're on the train. If you're driving at the moment, don't go wait until you stop driving. But if you're on the train, if you're jogging, if you're at the gym, all those sorts of things, now's a good time for you to go and get access to that.
Beautiful.
Very good. My life hack today, Ben, is something that I observed with you the other day.
Oh, okay.
It was YouTube. Remember I was showing you a YouTube clip?
Yes.
And then I was fast forwarding 10 seconds by double tapping the screen at the right.
On your mobile.
On my mobile, and double tapping on the left, because I watch a lot of YouTube on my mobile.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting that you went,
I had no idea, because I just put my hand on it and drag it along and said, no, tap. So 2 taps on the right side is 10 seconds. Forward. And 2 taps on the left, 10 seconds back.
Yep. And if you want to go 20 seconds, Ben, you just keep tapping. And then
so each tap is 5 seconds, or no? You just it's 2 quick ones.
2 is 10, then the next one's 20. So you can fast forward now.
There you go.
That is very helpful. Usually in the reverse, because you go, wow, I just watched something and that was really good. And I want to hear it again. Tap tap. Away we go.
Beautiful.
So there you go, folks. Check that out. Let me know if it works. Let me know if you've got another little YouTube hack, because I listen to and watch a lot of YouTube stuff. So if you've got some hacks, I want to know what they are for me personally, and I'll share them with everyone else. Ben, did you know?
Did you know, Bryce, CoreLogic's data? Thanks to our great friends at CoreLogic for putting out their market data. I'll just do some around the grounds of note. So a really strong performance, 0.9% of 1% for the month of September, with Melbourne and Sydney both bouncing pretty strongly in the month, at 1.7% for each of them. That brings Sydney's annual growth rate, still as Jeremy was alluding to before, at negative 4.8. Melbourne's negative 3.9. Brisbane still remains negative at 2.1. Adelaide negative at 1.1. Perth negative 9%. Hobart still in positive at 2.5. Darwin negative 9.5 for the year. And then Canberra positive 1.3. So combined capital cities negative 4.3. Combined regions negative 2.5. And nationally, we're still negative 3.9. But I suspect that trend is going to change, Bryce, in regards to in regards to what's happening. There's obviously a little bit more detail in here, but we'll put the link into the show notes when you can take a deeper dive in terms of some of the sub-regions and some of the information. Similar, just by way of example, the rapid bounce in home values over the past 2 months. Sydney is already in the last 2 months up 3.3. Melbourne's up 3.2 in the August and September data, and housing values remain 11.9% below their their July 2017 peak in Sydney, and 7.9% below their Melbourne peak in November of 2017. So some good data there from our great friends at CoreLogic. You can get your hands on that by going to the show notes, and we'll give you the link for that as well.
Was a great show, Ben. There was a fair bit covered. Hopefully that's offered some enormous assistance to our community, Ben. So until next week.
Knowledge is empowering, Bryce, but only if you act on it.
Well said. See you next week, folks. Hey there folks, Bryce Holdaway here. Before you go, if you're new to our community and only listened to maybe a handful of episodes, I thoroughly recommend that you go all the way back to episode number 1, where we unpack all of the foundations when it comes to property investing. Now for those of you that might be a little bit time poor, I've got good news for you. We have a binge guide that you can download straight away, which summarises the first 20 episodes where Ben and I unpack the foundational pillars of the A, B, C, D, and so much more. And you can get that straight away. If you go to thepropertycouch.com.au/TPC20, you can download it and consume it whenever you want. It's completely free and available now. And for those of you, just a quick reminder that nothing we've spoken about today constitutes financial advice. We recommend that you reach out to your licensed professional advisor so that you can look at your unique circumstances before acting on any information. Now don't forget, go to thepropertycouch.com.au/TPC20 and get your binge guide today.